Hey everyone, this is Professor Doc here. This is part 2 of the You Have Been Conditioned Not to Notice the Obvious series, and I'm coming at you here. What in the world is that? Hold on. Okay, we're going to try this again. Yeah, there we go. Okay. You notice this isn't the best. Filming my off-the-grid computer. This is my new off-the-grid computer. My old off-the-grid computer, for some reason, I think it was hacked. It was hacked. The screen stopped working on it. I mean, it was a computer from 1983 and was still working just fine. Until suddenly, the screen on this Toshiba satellite, this 4-inch thick Toshiba satellite, decided to just go blank on me. I'm like, nope, that's not a coincidence. That's deliberate attempt to, to undermine what I'm trying to get at here. So we're going to start showing you reasons why, explaining to you why and how you've been trained to not notice the obvious. Here's a good example. This fella, the Komodo dragon. Yeah, World War II pilot was shot out of the air and swam to the island of Komodo. And before he was rescued, he said that there were giant lizards, dragon-like looking things, on this island that he got onto, and everybody's like, yeah, right. Yeah, you're just a drunken sailor. What do drunken sailors know? And it turns out that later on some scientists, well, they're going to check up on this just in case. So, of course, scientists ask the native people, hey, we hear there's giant lizards or maybe a land crocodile is supposed to be on your island. And then the native peoples are like, oh yeah, there's 6-foot giant lizards that bite you and kill animals. And yeah, they're like the top predator here. And science goes, oh, yes, I'm sure there is. And of course they don't believe them, because why would you believe the people that have lived there for the last 200 or 300 years? Now, you don't listen to them because they're just the people that live there. So scientists, of course, they didn't believe, even when they talked to the native peoples, they didn't believe it. But in 1926, when someone captured 2 specimens and brought them to the scientific community, they're like, oh, we have discovered this fabulous prehistoric beast. No, you didn't discover it, you twit. And people who lived on the island knew about it for 300 years, and you're just too stupid to listen to them. But no, you know why? Because you've been conditioned, not trained, you've been conditioned not to notice the obvious. And the obvious is, if the people that live there tell you, hey, there's some giant critter or there's this phenomenon that goes on, you don't dismiss them as being quaint little idiots, which is basically what you do. But science has been conditioned to ignore the obvious. All right, here's another example. This one even goes back farther. We've got panda. Yes, ancient Chinese manuscripts going back thousands of years talk about this rather fat black and white bear that lives on leaves. Well, why did they put it in their manuscripts? Because, well, people have seen the thing. But no, science said there is no such thing as this giant black and white bear that lives on leaves. And it wasn't until Armand David, who was a French scientist, was given the hide and the skull of one of these pandas, where, once again, a native of the area said, oh yeah, there's this giant black and white bear that lives up in the high mountains there and eats leaves. Yeah, so what do they say? Science says. What do they know? People have only lived in China for 5,000 years. Good grief. What would they know about what happened, what lives around there? So Native goes up and actually hunts one of these things and brings his skin and skull back, and oh my gosh, the scientific community goes in an uproar because, ooh, look what we discovered. No, you didn't discover diddly, dude. You've been conditioned not to notice the obvious, and here's somebody throwing something obviously in your face. Yeah, there's a big black and white bear up here that eats leaves, but you're conditioned not to notice that, one, that person lives in that area. Two, yeah, we've seen them. And they've been written down about for thousands of years. That's sort of obvious, right? No, we are conditioned not to notice the obvious. And this thing right here, that's pretty obvious. That's a big black and white bear that eats leaves. Leaves, white, black, bear. Duh. I hate to use the word duh, but I can't think of any stronger, more quantifying word than duh. Oh, and while we're talking about duh, here's another one. Hey, what's that? Not the prettiest thing in the world. Giant squid. Sailors for ages, from the time that they started sailing thousands of years ago, have reported these giant squid. Sometimes they would attack ships. They'd see them attacking whales. They would see these giant squids out on the ocean. And, well, what does the scientific community say? Well, there is no such thing as giant squids, because we've never seen one. But they've washed up on shore, and the sailors say they've washed up on shore, and we've seen them. Well, obviously, why would the scientific community take the word of a bunch of drunken sailors who only spend their entire life on the sea sailing and basically in these things' living rooms? So why would they take the obvious word of people who know this? And so giant squids were legends. Even when the bodies washed up on shore, they're in such a bad state of decomposition most times that they couldn't definitively say, well, it's a giant squid. This just could be a piece of whale guts or something like that. Or maybe you have one anomalously bigger squid with a giant tentacle. Yeah, that was actually put out there once that I read about. And then later on, what happens? Oh no! We've got a specimen in the Smithsonian. I don't have a picture of that one, but it's very similar to this. They found a specimen of this giant squid that was intact enough to keep and put into the Smithsonian. And then what? What was said about it then? Well, there's probably just one specimen. There's probably not any more of them around. Yes, that's a long pause. That's a long pause of people going, duh. You found a specimen proving that these so-called drunken sailors, with a heave-ho-ho, even yet they don't know anything because, well, yeah, we've proven that here's one giant squid, but, what's one giant squid prove? Oh, later on, you get these photos, and these photos, and these photos, and they've actually captured them on camera. But hey, ignore the obvious about sailors telling you, hey, we've got squid. One, they spend their whole life on the ocean. With a heave-ho-ho. Two, they're not drunk all the time. Now, I'm not cutting down sailors and saying that they're prone to excessive amount of drinking. But when you're on the ocean all the time and you get back into port, and nobody believes you about the giant squids you see, and what else are you going to do? With a heave-ho-ho. So blame science for sailors drinking. I guarantee you that. And also, the scientists, some of the, especially the biologists, will go, well, let's go see if we can find a giant squid. So they go out in the boat for 2 weeks, zip around the ocean a little bit, and say, we've not found any giant squid. Well, duh. You're talking about sailors with a heave-ho-ho that have been on the ocean all their lives, and you take 2 weeks out of your mundane existence to pop into a luxury boat and zip around the ocean a little bit, glance over the side and say, I don't see any squid. Yeah. You've been conditioned not to see the obvious. And you've been conditioned not to, I can't even bring up the words right now. It's just too gruesome. Okay, here's another one. This one might be a little bit into the crypto sciences, but most familiar picture, Bigfoot, or as the Native American peoples would call it, Sasquatch. There have been tales, and I don't like to say the word tales. I should say reports or commentary about this bipedal, big furry humanoid creature that lived basically with the native peoples, especially in the Pacific Northwest and Canada. And the Native American peoples, they tell these stories going back as far as they can remember. They tell about what they called the Sasquatch and what we call now Bigfoot. Now, we don't have actual definitive evidence, scientific evidence, that Sasquatch exists. Mostly we have footprints, fur samples, eyewitness reports, and, video footage like this one, which some say has been debunked and others say hasn't. But you're conditioned not to notice the obvious. The obvious is the Native Americans have been in North America for thousands of years. They've seen Sasquatch. They've seen it. They've lived alongside it. They just learned to live with Sasquatch. And that's what they tell you. We just sort of let them do their thing, and we did our thing, and occasionally there'd be some type of little commotion between the two, but hey, you have that. And researchers will say, well, what evidence do you have apart from some footprints? And this is one of the more compelling pieces, it's like, well, the Sasquatch take and get dead trees and shove them into the ground upside down with the roots up to mark their territories. Oh, that's just too fabulous to believe. Well, here, we'll show you. So they take them out and show them these trees that are marking the territories of the Sasquatch. And science says, well, we don't have any evidence of any other primate doing this, so we really can't say this is definitive. It could just be some native peoples, going out there and putting them up like this, and for reasons that we don't know. And here comes a long pause for the duh look again. That long enough? Okay. It's like, yes, the native peoples just loved to go out and stick trees in the ground to perpetrate a hoax of one of their legends. Yeah, that's the, what would that be? The equivalent of redneck cow tipping? Hey, let's go out and find a big tree. We'll dig a hole, stick it in upside down so that white man thinks there's a Sasquatch. Duh. I mean, the Native Americans have been here for thousands of years, and they tell for thousands of years of this furry dude right here. But nope. The obvious is that, oh, there's some credibility to this, but, we have been trained to ignore the obvious. Now, with the last three examples, I will admit that there is absolute definitive proof of panda bears, Komodo dragons, giant squid. And, Bigfoot is still somewhat questionable because Bigfoot there may not be any Sasquatch around anymore. Or if they are, there's very few. Okay, get this thing on. Oh, for the love of God, hold on. Okay, everyone. Okay, I have to apologize for cutting that video short when we were talking about the Sasquatch, but I had to change locations. My position was compromised, and I had to pretty much make a quick getaway. And I'm going to continue from a different location. And I wanted to get to the gist of today's topic. The examples I showed you earlier was just to explain in a little bit of detail how you've been conditioned to ignore the obvious. And now we're getting down to what I was actually going to talk about. So, look at that. Here's what we got. You see this? This is landscaping. Yep, it's regular old landscaping. We've got rocks, we've got mulch. And what I was going to speak about is that there is evidence right in front of our eyes, laying out everywhere in plain sight for us to see, evidence of past, I won't say a past, but maybe multiple civilizations that were extremely, extremely technologically evolved that came before us. And this mundane rock, this type of rock that we see all over the place, in almost every section of the world, we see this type of rock. This is the biggest evidence of past advanced civilizations that you could ever want to come across, and it's in plain sight. But we ignore it completely. We completely ignore this as evidence. I mean, right here, you have what the science will tell you. This is quartz crystal, and this is sandstone matrix that's holding these quartz crystals together. Now, I apologize for not having a second screen that I can show you this better. And here's more. Here's these beautiful, almost decorative looking rocks. Well, not almost decorative. They are decorative looking rocks. And here they are in a matrix. Okay, and we find these type of rocks all over the globe. And here's some other ones. Here's some bigger rocks, but we still have those decorative type rocks that we use nowadays for landscaping. And what we have here and I'm going to use this rock here as a big example. Again, this is one of the greatest examples of a past civilization that is far advanced. Because this is not what they tell you it is. This is not just a bunch of quartz stones that randomly were formed inside a matrix by sedimentary action. This is definitive, absolute proof of landscaping from a very highly advanced civilization that came before us. And it is in plain sight, right in front of our eyes, and we just do not see it. And I showed you this one before. We have landscaping rock, we have mulch. Okay, again, landscaping rock, this is a different size, and mulch around it. The landscaping rock and the mulch are always beside each other. This is typical modern landscaping. I mean, we have this everywhere. See, we have our mulch, we have our landscaping, and here we have grass. All right, now this seems awfully mundane because, well, to us it is mundane. Now here's another example: mulch, different size landscaping rocks, and more mulch. Everyone's familiar with this. I mean, you can't walk around any suburban area now without seeing this type of landscaping. And this is nothing new. Here's a very good example. Here's your decorative rocks and another type of decorative rocks right next to it. I mean, this is everywhere. Here is your landscaping mulch and decorative rock pathways. Notice how this one, doesn't this look like veins running through a rock? Veins of, like, say, quartz or some other type of material? Come on, there we go. And here we go, another one. We've got mulch, rocks, and then we have dirt. And that's how it goes. We got rocks, mulch, and dirt. And right here, we have rocks, and the mulch is all around it. The mulch and the dirt is all around it. And of course you're saying, well, it's rock. It's all one big rock now. It's sedimentary rock. No, it's not. This is rock that has been, now here's a very good example. We've got all the different types. Remember the ones we saw before where we had larger rocks, and we had larger rocks. We had decorative colored rocks, and all this stuff in between here is the mulch. The mulch has been vitrified by McGlasi's comet striking the Earth. Joseph McGlasi has come up with this theory. Here we go. There's more big rocks, decorative colored rocks, and mulch. Came up with the theory of the comet that reshaped the Earth, struck the Earth, and vitrified all this landscaping. I mean, here's almost an irrefutable example. I'm sorry about the quality. You can't see it very well in the video. And I actually had some samples, actual samples of this that I could have taken high definition photos of. But for some reason, I had them setting outside. I had them away from the snow so I could bring them in, and they just suddenly disappeared. And I believe that is a indication that I'm being compromised over and over again here, because they don't want you to know what's going on. Let's look at this one again. See, what has happened here is there's been a cataclysmic event, and basically it's McGlasi's comet. McGlasi's comet struck the Earth, caused a major extinction event, but also caused this landscaping material. Picture this. This is picture this as one of those photos that we saw earlier. Okay, picture that as this. McGlasi's comet hits the Earth. All this, the stones don't get vitrified because, they can withstand some pretty high temperature. But all this surrounding material gets mixed in with the stones, either from the force of the impact or from, years and years of landscaping, because you put more landscaping on top, more mulch on top of this mulch every year, like we do now. More mulch on top, more stones on top whenever there's, they get dirt accumulates in there. So you put more stones on, and sometimes you change the color of the stones. I mean, we all do this here. We all do this. And the force of the comet, all that heat vitrified what is now, in this picture, the matrix that holds these decorative stones together. That is the mulch that was used for the landscaping for this advanced civilization. And we know they were highly advanced. Look closely at this. Our landscaping mulch is usually shredded. Okay, you follow me? Shredded wood. This stuff is almost tiny round particles. They were so advanced that their mulch wasn't shredded. It was shaped into tiny sphericals. That is an extremely advanced civilization. Look how fine, in this one especially, you can see. If you can see the cursor, look at the fine round granules that mulch was in before it became vitrified. And of course, here you have layers. See these layers? Layers, layers, layers. This is layers of mulch that has been vitrified. Layers and layers and layers. And there's an example right there. This civilization was around for years because you would not have that many layers of mulch and landscaping if they had not been around for thousands of years before we did, before we came along. Here's another one. Look at these layers of landscaping. That is irrefutable, but we have been conditioned to ignore the obvious. And hence, we ignore all this. We ignore this. And look at this. We have mulch, landscaping rock that, got the mulch kicked into it. So it's sort of a conglomerate. But this whole thing was vitrified. You can see, you can almost picture where the mulch stopped and the rock started. This could have been a sidewalk. Ancient kings could have walked down this sidewalk to their house and looked over at this mulch that now has been vitrified by McGlasi's comet. I mean, this is the evidence that's before us, but we don't see it because we've been trained. I'm sorry, I keep using that trained word. We have been conditioned not to see the obvious. Look how obvious that is. So, I really don't know. Look at this. Mulch and rock. I'm sorry. This is the mulch, and this is rock, and look there. Larger rocks. With a heave-ho-ho. These rocks right here. Especially this one, this marvelous piece of history, we have been trained to ignore. We have been trained. You see, they're even training me to not say the word conditioned. We have been conditioned to ignore the obvious. This is ancient landscaping from an advanced civilization that used round mulch and stones. More advanced than our shredded mulch and stones. Round mulch and stones. It's just unbelievable. McGlasi saw this. McGlasi knew this. And a lot of his work was kept in the dark. And speaking of the dark, this is Professor Doc. This is Professor Doc going dark right now. Take care, people.